does not have any requirements, doesn't have to have any background in anything. I can come in, and this has happened in the past, I can come in as mayor and go to sleep and don't have to turn a tap. Now, the people could vote me out the next election, but that'd be a choice. That's one of the fallacies that you have in an elected form of government. Now, hopefully the people have enough smarts and sense to know that when you hire somebody, or elect somebody, they're going to take it serious. But that's one of the problems with a strong mayor charter form of government, is that way. Voters vote me in, but there's no requirements. So they're 25 years of age, and I can have another job, do whatever I want to. And that's one of the problems that we have with my form of government. So you have to be careful who you elect. Okay?
The city council makes all decisions except day-to-day dealings. What will change? Except fewer men deciding how the city is run and paying $40,000 more to run day-to-day operations. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, most of that statement was correct, other than basically our position is we answer to the elected officials. We have to do what they've set out for us to do. I'm just real quickly going to give a scenario. I use this in a lot of places, and especially since this is new, you've had it's kind of outside the box for the way it's been here forever. But it's very easy to compare it to a school and a superintendent. Now, everybody in here that lives in the school district gets an opportunity to vote for their school board member. Those 5 school board members then hire the superintendent. Okay? And then the superintendent answers to those 5 board members. If we had a big chart up here, it would show the superintendent and the city manager. Then it would show 5 school board members and either 5 or 7 or 9 council members. Then it would show principals. Then it would show department heads on the city side. Then it would show teachers, and it would show employees. And it's very much the same order. Exactly. And so, basically, if there was a change of government to a council manager where the people still elect the elected officials, and they, in turn, would decide who ran the city, just like the school board goes through a very, very long process to hire a superintendent that meets the qualifications that they need for that school at that time. Then that superintendent answers to that school board. The city manager would answer to the elected officials. Now, if they didn't answer to the elected officials in the way they wanted to, it takes a majority vote. If there's only 5 members, it takes 3 members, and that city manager's gone. And that's just the nature of our job. We work for the council at the will of the council. The council is elected by the citizens. So, to think what we're talking about is way out there far-fetched. You do it every year. You elect a different school board member. They hire superintendents. They go over resumes. They look how they've done in other schools. They look at how they've done, if they've been here, moving up, principal, assistant superintendent, things like that. That's what a council does if they're in a position to hire a city manager.
I think Diane answered this question. What happens to the city clerk? Is it still an elected position, and do we continue to have a city clerk? We do continue to have a city clerk, but it will not be an elected position. It will be appointed by the city manager, right? And then
that depends. If you go statutory form, which means you do what the state statutes, you're governed by the state statutes. You cannot be any more lenient than them, but you can be stricter than them. Or if you go charter or home rule, which all of these people are charter home rule, then they have things that were voted in when they did it in 1946 or 1957 or 1965. Some of them are very quirky. Some of them have to do with how people, some have police chiefs that are elected, and they want to keep it that way. Altus did, but others don't. And some have, they've combined the clerk treasurer position, and some don't. And so, you know, it depends on whether you're looking at a statutory form of council manager or you're looking for a home rule charter where you kind of quirk and make some different rules. The only thing about that is when you do it, it can never be changed by the board. It has to go completely back to a vote of the people. So in some cities, they put in the spending limit at $1,500 in 1957. Today, it's still $1,500. So a city manager or a department head can't order anything without it going to a vote of the council. They have a lot of special meetings. They have a long meetings voting $1,550 items because the only way to change it is a complete vote of the people, and that's expensive.
One of the things I want to talk about that is when you do this, the charter. We're a charter, okay? And a charter, you can vamp this way any way you want to, like in our charter, which is a problem, but it's a good problem, okay? Our charter says that we cannot raise utility rates any more than what's being raised by us, okay? So a PSO or GRDA, we're a public power community, we own our own power system, but we buy the power from GRDA. If they give us a 3-cent cost, we can't raise it any more than 3 cents. That's part of our charter. Charter says that, and Mike's right, charter says I can only spend $2,500 maximum. Now, I'll just tell you right now that that's a pain because I'm always signing stuff and buying stuff, going to the council, okay? It's a pain. But we do it, and I do that, the way I do that in a council meeting under, I can't think what it's called, consent agenda. But I'll tell you, I'm one of the very people that I'll tell you, my council meetings, if I have a council meeting that lasts more than 20 minutes, there's something wrong. But 20 minutes, because I have everything done in order before I get started. I'm very blessed that I've got a good council to work for and a good city to work for. But again, I'll tell you, when I'm gone, the next person behind me may not understand municipal government. And how have I learned municipal government? I've learned it through OML, through people that have taught me and learned my ways through the process. Somebody else may not have that time and experience. I'm very blessed that way that I could do this. I'm a full-time mayor. That's what I am. I was part-time for two terms, but I've learned it that way. So that you're right. $2,500 is not much money. You can't spend anything $2,500.
Just to follow up real quickly on what Mike Nunley was saying, there is a distinction between the statutory form of council manager form of government and whatever you want to put in your charter. So the question was what happens to the clerk and talking about the purchasing. Those can be addressed through the charter, but it is a different process. You'd have to go through quite a process to adopt a charter because you're really writing your own constitution. For local matters, when you adopt a home rule charter, that's exactly what it means, home rule. And so you can put different things into the home rule charter than the statutes allow. So under the statutes, the clerk becomes an appointed position. The treasurer becomes an appointed position, only that one's by the council. But if you chose to go look at a change of government through a charter, you could write it differently. I think you could build in some triggers or fudge factors on some of these other matters, but you'd have to do that and think about it. Otherwise, if you're looking at the statutory form, as Mike Nunley pointed out, you have to follow it exactly.
This question is, what is the procedure to elect city council members if there is a change to city manager level?
There'd be no change in electing city council members. The only change in the governing body would be that the mayor would be not be elected as mayor at large. The mayor's position would be filled from among the members of the council by a vote of the council members. But they'd all be elected just as they are now, as council members, with the same terms and the same staggered terms. Again, unless you adopted a charter and had a different procedure, but under the statutes, that it would be no change for the council members.
And what duties does the new council have besides voting on budget matters?
The new council, as a city manager form of government, I'll have to let one of these guys, because I'm not familiar with that, no.
Basically, depending on your budget, depending on, not on your budget, on your spending limit, they would have to approve any expenditures over whatever the spending limit was. They have to approve all resolutions and ordinances, which are the laws of the city, whether to change one, add one, amend one. They will approve all the budget, and then they will hire and fire the city manager.
We all hear these days about what our legislature is doing up at the Capitol, right? And we were just down here, Diane and us were talking about House Bill 1875, which deals with the Oklahoma Tax Commission. Legislators create policy. Council manager form of government, the council and the mayor creates policy. The city manager carries it out. I always use the analogy, if my council tells me to paint the streets purple with pink polka dots, it's my job to rally the staff, go buy the paint, and get her done. So that's how that works. And it works the best. I've worked both as an administrator and as a manager, and I really think that the council manager form of government is the most efficient. I may be biased because I also work for a council manager form of government, but we also try really hard, because my job depends on it, and so do my department heads, that we follow the will of the council. And the will of the council is usually determined by the citizens. So that's how that works. That chain works. If it's not working out, the will of the council's not getting done, they'll remove me from my position. So.
It's been said a decent city manager will cost the city of Eufaula at least $80,000 a year. The mayor makes half that. City council has a hiring freeze on employees. Can you tell us how they plan to pay for a city manager?
And that's been brought up, and I've seen articles in local papers and things, Muskogee paper, about that very thing. I'll be real honest with you. I went to Hinton, Oklahoma, and spoke about 3 weeks ago. It's as far that way as it is this way, on I-40, and just a little ways off. And they have had a city manager. It's a town form of government with a city manager for years and years and years. They just hadn't. They'd go 5 years without one, and then they'd hire one, then they'd keep them for 10 years, and then they'd retire or leave, and they'd go 5 years without one. And I think their mayor summed it up when they asked, what do you think it would cost? And I said, a town this size, $65,000 probably. And they said, one guy on there, a former state senator, said, well, how can we afford to do that? And the mayor, a very nice young lady, very good businessman, and her answer was, how can we afford not to? And when we were talking earlier and on the way over, I started out at Manford, a town of 3,300, at about $60,000 9 years ago. Today, I make $97,000. I've taken their debt from $8 million to $3 million, their reserves from $1 million to about $4.5 million. We have doubled our sales tax. We're fixing to open about 5 new retail businesses in the marina. In those 9 years that I've been there, I probably averaged around $75,000, which would be $630,000 to $650,000 total in 9 years. I've brought in a little over $1.5 million in grants. In 9 years, we have not raised we own our gas and our electric and our water and our sewer. We have not raised our utility rates in 9 years. We have built new parks. Just put out for bid, open Thursday for a new splash pad. We built lots of parks. I don't know of very many city managers that don't pay for themselves over and over and over. I'm gonna let Pam tell you what she makes and what she's done in 9 years.
I started, like Mike said, I'll be 9 years in June at Collinsville, and I started about 65. My base is now at 105. But my grant experience was huge. I was the city clerk in Mangum, which is a small town in western Oklahoma. So I learned, we wear many hats in small towns. So I learned how to write the grants. I went to training for that. Since I've been in Collinsville, I've brought in $11.8 million in grants in the 9 years that I've been there. And, it's just the experience and knowing, you have to be at the table to participate. So, your city manager, I go to a lot of meetings, but you have to be there at those meetings in order to get those kinds of grants. So it's the relationships that you build, the partnerships with these entities. Like I said, we wear many, many hats, and my week is probably, there's no way if somebody's telling me they're doing the whole job in 40 hours, I just don't believe it. I work anywhere from 60 to 70 hours a week. And sometimes that doesn't include, the meetings and events that I go to during the week. So it's a lot of work.
And some of it is just the opportunities to collaborate with either other cities, network with opportunities to create strategic partnerships, public-private partnerships, and extend those dollars. When in Muskogee, we had to, we're looking at upgrading our police dispatch center and our fire dispatch center, and that was going to cost about $400,000 for each center. And we partnered with the county to create a 911 dispatch center, and I'm now was just putting in about $400,000 a year for the operation for the city's cost. So in capital cost, I saved $800,000. Just in the police department, it was costing me annually $400,000 a year. So I was able to expand, upgrade the capital cost that what we were going to need to do, plus maintain our operational cost just in the police. So I saved about another $150,000 a year from the fire side, and just being able to do that. Muskogee's budget for the last 5 years has been flat. We were able to, through purchasing changes and operations, go through the economic downturn, 0 layoffs, 0 furloughs. We've increased our contribution to the employee health fund by $1.5 million. And that was all with the same amount of dollars that we started with. Like I said, we've had a flat budget. So it's that expertise on funding management operations. We started, when we talked about reserves, they had no reserve policy, and they had about $5 million in reserve. And we are now at, when I left, they were at 15%, 14% in reserve. The debt service was able to restructure the debt service and save about $1 million over the life of 2 bond issues, and reduce the payoff from 15 years to 8 years. So we paid that off sooner. So it's those types of expertise that a manager will think, how can you not, or will it cost more to be able to provide that service? Yes, but any employee that you bring in a business should save at least that much money for operations.
Real quickly, one last comment there. Managers don't just work on the income. We want to attract retail. We want to see more sales tax and things of that nature, but we also manage the outgo. So as an example, in Shawnee, we had 2 major things that needed to be done. We need to deal with our pension, and we need to deal with our workers' comp. Workers' comp was $1.2 million. with the different initiatives we put together in the last 5 years, we've cut it in half. That's still too much for a city with 300 employees, but we've made